one more minute for those who are jumping in here. Just going to give one more minute for everybody to get in. So give us one more minute of your time and we will get started. All right, everybody, it looks like we're 1 minute past the hour. So as promised, I want to kick us off here for today. First of all, I want to make sure that everybody can hear me okay. So if you can hear me, if you can see me, hopefully you didn't just eat lunch. If you can see me and hear me okay, go down to the bottom of your screen. There's a chat module there. You should see a chat button. Just click on that and then type a message in. It should come up as all panelists. That's fine. Just type a message in. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a hello. Give me something that lets me know you can hear me okay. Hello from Calgary. Hello, Mark. How are you? Arvind, hello. Great to have you both here. Looks like there's two people here. Oh, Angela. Great to, I guess I can't say great to see you. Great to hear from you again. Dean, hello. Larry, great. I'm glad everybody can hear me. This is great. Leonardo, thank you so much. All right, folks. So that seems to be working. So there's a little reason we did that test as well. I'm sure by now you are all experts in Zoom and Teams and all sorts of other software since this pandemic began this year. But what we will do here today is you have questions, okay? When you have questions, as Jay moves through his presentation here today, you can feel free to either put them in this chat box if you prefer, but even better yet, there's a Q&A tab you should see along the bottom. It's one or so over from chat. The reason that's kind of cool is it works the exact same way as chat, but allows me to kind of see individually who ask questions. They just don't get lost the same as they can in chat. But either way, whatever's convenient for you, I will watch the chat box and the Q&A to make sure we get your questions collected and we get them answered here today. Okay. So just before we get started jumping into today, if we could move one slide forward in the deck, here we go. So as with these presentations, as you know, we like to the week following these What's Next presentations, we like to do a roundtable. And it's an opportunity for you to come and ask further questions since you've had time to kind of think through the topic and maybe even apply this to your own organization and some questions will arise. Now, that would normally be the case. We had one last month, and in this case, Jay would be joining us. Last month, Wendy joined us. So we also try in this roundtable to have our host back, if it works logistically, to answer any additional questions you have. So it's just a chance to share with your peers, to ask questions, and to learn beyond today, because a lot of times questions do arise afterwards. Now, because of the holidays, we're not having a session next Thursday. I've moved it to January 14th, just to give us enough room for everybody. Some people have vacation and all sorts of stuff happening in Quebec. If you're in Quebec, you're not actually coming back. In some cases till the 11th of January. So hence, we've moved this to January 14th, Thursday, January 14th, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have a roundtable discussion on today's topic. We'll be discussing several of the strategies that Jay is going to talk about and the ideas and the issues as they apply to your organization and your business. And again, it's a chance to connect with peers and to learn and to ask further questions. I'll be facilitating it, yours truly. So if you want to join us, that would be great. And feel free to share this. If there's others in your organization that you think would find value in having this dialogue, by all means, feel free to share this with them. You can watch your email for further information on this. I will be sending some information on this roundtable in the coming days, as well as again in the new year. And for anybody that replies to me and says, yeah, I'd like to go, I'll send you the link just before we go live. Okay, so there's a quick rundown of the continuation, if you will, of today's session beyond what we're going to do today. Again, feel free as we go to ask any questions that you might have. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to everybody our speaker today. It's Jay Davis. Jay's our very own advisor when it comes to supply chain and operational excellence. So Jay's put this together, and I just have a quick little biography for Jay here. He's a global operations and supply chain business executive who for the last 15 years has lived and worked in Canada, the United States, and Europe. He was recruited by international companies, has been recruited by international companies such as Volvo, Canada Post, and Stanley Black & Decker to lead divisions in their operations in turnarounds, scaling up, and scaling down in some cases, people, process, and lean systems are all under his areas of expertise to accommodate market demands. Now, currently, as I mentioned, he's our operational excellence supply chain leader for NGen Manufacturing Canada, as well as an advisor for other organizations on how to manage their supply chain and operations through COVID-19, preparing them to be stronger when we come out the other side. And the big word there, the key word, I guess, is when, although there is some light at the end of the tunnel. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Jay. Jay's going to walk you through this presentation, and then we will, as I said, feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll watch those, and if it's appropriate, I'll stop Jay. But then at the end, we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A as well. So Jay, can you hear me? We'll start there.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. I can hear you and see you. Everything looks good. So I'm going to turn my camera off and mute myself, but I'll be here if you need anything, Jay.
Okay, right on. Thank you. So Sean said I was an expert. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I'm going to share with you some perspectives today on for the last 15 years when I was traveling around the world to these different plants in probably over 30 countries. And what I loved about traveling to the different plants was I learned something. It didn't matter if I was at the worst performing plant in the company at the time, I would learn something really cool. They'd be doing something that would be really interesting. It's like, well, that's different. I wouldn't have thought of that. And I'm going to share a little bit of that perspective. I also, when I traveled, when I went to, say, multiple plants in Brazil, I would see a trend. I'd see the same kind of cultural behavior. And I would talk to them about, well, why is it that I see it here in Brazil and not other places? And the Brazilians would share with me, well, this is how we think of things. And I would go back to my head office, whether it be the US, Canada, and Europe. I'd make decisions. Where are we going to invest next? Where are we going to build our next plant? Where are we going to expand? And a lot of those decisions were based on KPIs, operational KPIs, such as safety, quality, environmental, performance of the plant. But more and more, they became more relevant around the delivery performance, the cost performance, and flexibility. If I threw another product at that plant, how good were they going to be to accommodate that new product without asking for a lot of investments or a lot of costs or excuses as to why they couldn't ramp up or ramp down? So I made decisions based on what I saw at the plants and the performance around various indicators. So today, I'm going to share with you a study that we did. And here are the questions we're trying to answer. And the people that were involved, Stuart Kramer, Jason, our CEO, Deloitte Canada, and Chris Brown also gave some really great insights. So it's not just me, it was a group of small people that tried to understand if the instincts and the insights were accurate from a data perspective. So here's the questions we tried to answer. Who are the best manufacturing countries in the world and why? I have my opinion, but mine's just an opinion. So can we take a look at generally who is kind of doing well in certain areas? We're going to talk about operational excellence. And what I'm talking about here is Toyota production systems. Where do they fit? And then we're going to talk about some good examples that we saw with innovation, digitization, and OE practices, and how then NGen is going to move forward with this understanding and this knowledge. So if you have questions during the process, please throw them at me. You don't want to hear me talk for 45 minutes straight. That's going to be bad. So Sean will catch them, and then we'll answer the questions as we go. So here's the agenda. So let's start off with what a production system is. The Toyota production system, the grandfather, it's it. I mean, it started many, many, many years ago, and then a lot of other people got wise and created their own systems. But it's very similar in perspective. And there's a lot of good systems out there, whether it be Volvo's production system or GM's, or there's just a lot of other companies that have developed their own systems and made them fit their culture. But this is what I mean by a system. It connects the processes. Sometimes I hear people say, when I ask them if they have a production system, they say, yeah, we have Six Sigma. Oh, that's great, but that's not a system. That's a process. And how does it fit in relation to just-in-time or other type of lean principles? So today we're going to talk a little bit about how the principles and processes are connected to a system, and there's a maturity level and a path. So what's the value of operational excellence? Sometimes I've asked that question and they say, well, it's a philosophy, it's a principle, it's just a way of being. Yeah, I'm an ops guy. I need more than that if I'm going to deploy this system. So here's my perspective, and I'm not an expert, but here's my perspective on where these systems fit and the value that they can provide. My first responsibility as an ops person or as a business leader is to hit the numbers. You know, I learned this at General Motors. I had almost 15 years there. Get the units out the door in good quality and low cost. Get them out the door. Hit your daily, hit your weekly, hit your monthly numbers. That's your operational responsibility. So then the next question is, what's my next responsibility? Well, try and figure out how to make job one easier. So it might have taken you 8 hours before. Figure out how you can make it take 7 hours. Make it easier. And this is where OE fits. OE systems helps to make job number one easier. Whether it be you put in just-in-time principles or Kanban squares or standardized work or good quality problem solving, it's supposed to make job one easier. And why would we want to do that? Well, because most companies have visions and have a strategic perspective. They want to transform the business. They want to hit a home run. That's why they're hired. Executive CEOs are hired to hit the home runs. And they've got 3 to 5 years to do it, generally. Well, how do you do that? So if a CEO and executive come up with this great big strategy and say, I want to conquer the world, okay, how are you going to do that? You're going to hire a bunch more people to help conquer the world, or you're going to give it to the people that already have a day job? You can give it to the people that have a day job if you're helping to relieve them of their day job. So this is where I see the value is, and this is what I try and drive and grow or drive when I'm with companies. Make job one easier through the systems so that then they have time to spend time on the strategic hit the home run type activities. So that's just maybe it's a philosophical perspective of mine, but it's where I see the best value. So let's get down to the countries. Who are the best in the world? I'm sure there's many, many different views on this. So I'm going to share with you not who's the best, but I'm going to give you an idea as to who looks like they're leading and who looks like they're following based on 60 plus data points that Deloitte and myself and Stuart and a few others gathered to determine how do we measure the performance of a country. And generally we measure the performance with economic indicators or operational indicators and process. So the question is, how do you tier those? How do you layer them so they make some type of sense? Well, kind of like a Christmas tree. At the top of the Christmas tree are things like economic and financial indicators, but they're results. Can't really do much with them, they're results. What you can do is you can focus on performance indicators, and this is where the plants come in. And when I mean plants, I mean everything in the supply chain, whether it be an OEM or tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, whatever it takes. And this is, in general, how the plants are measured from a performance perspective. From a flexibility, it's more about, can that plant flex up or down in a cost-efficient way? That's very important to understand from an investment perspective. The other aspect is, can I add a new product? Can I change a product? Can I do a minor model change or a major model change easily at that plant? Is it easier to do it in a Mexican plant or a Canadian plant? And these help us determine the performance of a plant. But the hard work actually happens in the processes. And this is where, these are the levers. If we want to improve the KPIs, we pull the levers down in the processes and we improve these things. And then that has the result that we need for the KPIs and then the results. So this is the approach that we took. So with that, let's take a look at the top of the tree, the economic results. When you look at all the different economic results that I think policymakers look at, it's hard to figure it out. Like, which one should you use? Is employment growth, is that a priority, or is it really market share? It's hard to tell, but what we can tell is the countries that are generally leading and the countries that are following. So employment growth. And we focused our efforts on North America and the US market. Primary reason is when you take a look at Canada, in particular the US market, is $21 trillion. The next closest is China at 14. If I want to go get the Chinese market, I'm not going to make in North America and ship to China. I'm going to buy a plant in China, or I'm going to buy a company. So we focus on the US market because it's still almost double the next closest country in China. And then from China, it drops off fairly rapidly to Japan, which is the next highest GDP country at 5 trillion. So employment growth. Let's take a look at market share. China has 18% of the US market share. Mexico's at 14%, Canada we're at 12. So we're not leading. China and Mexico are growing faster than we are with that market share. Foreign direct investment. If a company wants to dominate the US market more, they're not going to invest in China or Europe. So we just looked at Mexico, US, and Canada. Mexico has 3 times more foreign direct investment than Canada does. US is number 2. So we're not leading. United Nations does a competitive industrial performance index, which takes a bunch of different numbers and they put them together and they determine who is the most competitive. You can see their rankings. You can see the leaders, and the leaders are kind of the same. So overall, this is kind of what it looks like at the top of the tree. Now if we go to the middle of the tree, this gets tougher. Because if you look at the far left in safety, countries don't make readily available safety stats to say the manufacturing sector had a lost time incident rate of 1.2. You can't get that information. But what we can do is we can take a look at other indicators that will tell us how we're positioned. So for safety, we're positioned fairly well. And we're positioned well because some of the indicators from the corruption index, we're very transparent. So we're very transparent. We've got a high union density. And let's not kid ourselves. Back in the day, the unions helped us focus on safety and transparency. So the countries that lead in safety, Canada, Germany, and the UK. From an environmental perspective, it's a little bit easier. The environmental performance indicator is an index that's used globally. In these countries, the top 8 manufacturing countries, you can see who leads and you can see who follows. However, we're in the top tier globally. So being 4th isn't so bad. We're in pretty good shape. Same thing with quality. We're not the top 3, we're not leaders, but we're in the top tier. But what is interesting is where people thought quality was with other countries before is rapidly improving. We looked at measurements such as J.D. Power Awards. We looked at Shingo Awards, Deming Awards. We looked at brand recognition and world reputation. And you can see that China and South Korea are climbing very, very quickly. So in Canada, the quality is good enough for the customer. And it's something that we need to maintain. Delivery. How are we positioned to deliver to the US market? Well, pretty good. I mean, obviously, we have the most amount of border crossings than Mexico and any other country. What's interesting there, though, we need to make sure our borders, we continue to invest. If they become bottlenecks, we're in trouble. And the reason why we're in trouble is when we look at international airports, China and Mexico have far more international airports than we do. If the borders lock up, China and Mexico will have the resources and the transportation ability to get the product to the US. When it comes to cost, we know our cost challenges. We know labor costs, we know taxes, transportation, and that's where we're positioned from a cost perspective. Flexibility. This is about if I need a plant or a supply chain to flex up, 15 to 20% in volume or flex down, or if I want to add a new product to a plant, which plant is going to require the most investment as compared to either additional people or additional equipment? Or do they already have processes in place to accommodate a new product, which makes them generally more flexible and cost efficient? So we looked at quite a few different things there. We looked at how easy is it to do business in the countries, to make change? The union density, what's our labor agreements? Are they flexible? It doesn't have to, and there's some really strong union labor agreements that are very flexible. So I want to make sure that we're not blaming anyone in particular, because I've seen some very good union agreements that are flexible. Flexibility, digitization. When I add a new product to a plant, I'm doubling the amount of information flow of quality data and other information that's going to flow throughout that plant. How well are they going to manage that information? Is it going to be through manual Excel spreadsheets, or is it going to be digitized and it's going to be managed from a digital perspective in a much easier way? So we looked at those aspects. We also looked at innovation. The biggest concern that we had, and I'll share it a little bit more, is digitization and innovation. But you can see that from a flexibility perspective, this is where we landed. Now, the question is, well, what do the customers care about? Well, yes, they care about safety and environment. I don't want to discount that. My daughter is an environmentalist, so an environmental scientist, so it'd be bad for me to do that anyway. It's bad for my health. But the customers believe that the safety and environment from these countries is good enough to buy. And what they are more concerned about, and is what a little bit more difficult for supply chains to hit, is flexibility, delivery, and cost. And these countries do well with what the customers care about the most. Okay, so if we go back to the operational KPIs and we put into place the focus on cost and flexibility and delivery, this is where we land. We're followers. We're definitely not leaders. Are we 6th place? I don't know. I don't think anybody can understand that. But are we top 3? No. So we have some opportunities of delivery, cost, and flexibility to improve our position. Now I'm going to go to the very bottom of the tree, the process indicators. Let's take a look at operation system deployment. When we take a look at the Deming Awards and the Shingo Awards and the JD Power Quality Awards, these are the top 3 countries that have a huge impact. I worked for General Motors for almost 15 years, and I'll never forget a speech by Rick Wagner at the time. And this was back in probably 2003. And he said the biggest concern and biggest threat he had back at that time period was not Toyota, was not Honda, it was Hyundai and Kia. He said because the South Koreans have the cost figured out, and don't kid yourself, they're going to get the quality figured out really, really quickly. And they've done that. I had a few plants in South Korea, phenomenal execution. And I asked one of my directors one time, why is it that you guys execute so amazingly well? And he said a couple of things. He said, Jay, our leaders demonstrate, they don't manage. So when our leaders tell us that they need us to do something, we don't ask as many questions because they demonstrate the principles. Okay, so they execute really well. And that was the primary, I'll say, message, but very, very strong. We looked at an innovation index. We were ranked, I think, the highest for education. We had the highest education ranking, or top 3. But yet our innovation, we were ranked 6th out of the 8 countries. Well, why is that? Well, what we do believe is that we have highly educated people that are not going into the manufacturing sector. We have patents, and we have a lot of that good activity going on, but it's not being part of the manufacturing sector. And I'll share with you a story where when I was living in Belgium with my three girls and my wife, and my daughter played for a Belgian soccer team, club team. So she was the only expat. And over a 2-3 week period, and this was in about grade 5, we noticed that a bunch of the girls couldn't attend. And we asked the parents, I said, where is Moria? Or where is, Chloe? Oh, they're studying. Okay, well, what are they studying for? Well, they have their test. Well, what test? And they were having tests at an earlier age to determine what stream they should go into. Whether they should go, when they get to high school, into more of a philosophy academic stream, or if they should go into more of a technical, practical stream, like skilled trades. And I thought, at the time, I thought that's crazy. Because if I did the test in grade 5, I'm not sure I'd make any stream. I wouldn't be going to school. I was not the brightest. But I now think about it and think, well, you know what though? What it did do was it started the conversation early on in elementary school that, you know what? If you don't go to university, that's okay. Because there's a very strong option with technical and skilled trades. And that has kind of dawned on me thinking, well, they just take a different approach on manufacturing innovation. So when people come out of the schools in Germany, they're more apt to apply some of that innovative, highly educated type activity to the manufacturing sector. Whereas I'm not sure we do that as much. We do it. We have pockets of excellence. We really do. But it's not the same as what I saw in Germany. Digitization. You can see the countries, and this is a global digitization index. You can see the countries that lead. So I asked a question in Europe, why are you guys so much stronger? And this was back when I was living in Europe, in digitizing. And a couple people said, Jay, it's because digitizing neutralizes the language challenge we have. In Europe, I don't know, there's 8 to 10 languages. But when you digitize, it helps to reduce the language challenges. So they've driven that faster. South Korea and Japan, why are they digitizing at the speed in which they're doing that? They're both islands. South Korea is an island because it's got a communist state on one side and it's got water on the rest. Japan has a communist country not too far away with China and is surrounded by water. Digitization allows them to do many, many things because they have to, because they are an island, and allows them to do it efficiently. So can we ever overcome that? No, but can we recognize that maybe we need to we need to kind of move at a faster pace and start the process a little bit harder? I think so. Okay, I'm going to quickly stop there for a minute. Sean, any questions or from the group, or before I go into some good processes? So that's the country data, what it's telling us.
Yeah, there was actually, I have had a couple of emails sent in to me here. So one of the questions that came in was based on where some of the countries are at, and you know, you've explained why we're in that position. Do you have any insights or ideas as to what Canada as a country should be doing in order to advance our position? Do you have any recommendations? There's probably a lot of directions we could go, but is there something that stood out to you through this study that we should really be focused on as a country to advance our position?
I'm gonna share with you Japan's journey, and this was a conversation I had with Jason back in April, May. People wonder, how is it that Japan is such an amazing manufacturing country? Well, if you think about Toyota, they came across to the US and learned a lot, and then they went back and created the Toyota production system. And then they shared that with their tier ones, saying, hey, and they didn't demand, they shared it. This is what we are doing. And then it became more powerful because the tier ones took it on. Japan's an island, it's not a big island. And then it proliferated. So can we proliferate our good manufacturing practices as well as Japan? Sure we could. Got to be a little humble. And we have to realize that that's not what differentiates. You know, it's more probably the product features. And so we can proliferate a lot more. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. I think there's two camps. One is there's something we can do, the companies can do, and there's something the governments can do. But sometimes we say, it's not my fault, it's all the government. The government has to do this. They have to lower taxes. They have to do this and that and this and that. Yeah, that would help. There's certainly things that they can do can help, but there's a lot of things that the companies can do themselves to help to improve the situation. Anything else, Sean, that
No, there was two questions, but they kind of tied together the same. It was kind of a, what should we be focused on, you know, from a manufacturing standpoint, from a country standpoint, from a government standpoint, but it sounds like you're going to dive into that. So
yeah. So let's right on. So we're going to get into that. And I've pulled a couple of good practices or good processes that we've seen and how that could help us from a cost and a flexibility perspective. So we're going to look at operational excellence systems, we're going to look at innovation, and we're going to look at digital transformation. So let's go back to the system. Now, this was my responsibility. So like I said, there's a lot of other good systems out there from different companies, but I'm going to share you with this one because I know this one the best. This was the system, and you can see the different principles and processes that were connected together to develop the system. But what Volvo did back in early 2000 was they hired a consulting company, they brought in Toyota experts, and they said, we need a Volvo production system. Toyota helped General Motors develop theirs. So they're known to help. So Volvo created this system, and what the group chair at the time says, but I want to know where they're at from a maturity level. You can't just say that somebody has just-in-time principles or they don't have just-in-time principles. It's not that black and white. You start off implementing some just-in-time principles, and then you add more features as the company grows and as you need them, to a point where you get to a really, really, really mature just-in-time system. So there's a progress. And what Volvo did was they measured that progress on a maturity level between 1 and 5. 5 being world class, 1 is just starting out. And what that measurement allowed us to do was it allowed the plants to understand where they were and where they wanted to go. And we could actually see progress. Sometimes people deploy systems and say, yeah, but it's a philosophy, it's a principle, it's complex. All right, as executives and people in operations, our job is to make complex simple and deployable. So I'm going to share with you some examples within the Volvo production system. And let's talk about problem-solving methodology. This would be a highly mature problem-solving system at a plant level. And it's highly mature because they've taken the different problem-solving methodologies and they put them together in logic that makes some sense. The first time you have a problem, you pull the and-on cord on the line saying, I need help in solving this problem. And that hits the most amount of people and is the simplest. If the problem doesn't get solved, it'll sometimes show up in a daily meeting, at which time you'll talk about defects. That's the second time you can problem solve with a group setting, but it's really quick. If the defect continues, then you've got a 5 why perspective. Then you've got Kaizen events, and you've got green belt and black belt projects. The point is that some people say, well, I have Six Sigma. Yeah, but it's not addressing it. It's very costly. You need to kind of focus on what the general population can use to resolve issues. And 99% of the issues are going to be resolved by the first 3 steps. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about the problems, about the 5 why, and show you how you can use a 5 why methodology to be flexible, but detailed. This is just a standard beginning of a 5 why. It was called a quick response problem solving methodology. But what's different about this was I used to work in health and safety. And whenever we had a health and safety accident, we would have the supervisor fill out an investigation form. And I was doing this and I thought, and then the quality department would have the same form filled out if there's a quality defect. And I started to think about, well, who cares if it's safety or quality? You're asking the same questions. So this is an example of using one form to solve any issue. We used to use this to solve financial report issues. So if a financial report was delayed, it was a delivery issue. So, and if it was delayed month over month and it was hard to get out, we'd have them do this. Why? Because we don't want people to get creative on how they're analyzing. We want them to get creative on the actions, not on the analysis. Move through the analysis quickly and get to the action. Firefighting is done really efficiently. So that's what we're focusing on. Firefighting, the way firefighters fight, they solve things in a standard way really quickly. So the other part, ask simple questions. You know, the 4M method is not that complex. You ask the question, was standardized work followed? And if it wasn't, guess what? You know where you got to focus. So this is about taking, I'll say, more complex type thinking and problem solving and building it into something simple. Because we're trying to build employee capability. We don't need specialists. I shouldn't say that. We need specialists. But part of the role of the specialist is to translate and transfer the knowledge to the rest of the population. This is
Jay.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was a question that was sent in to me here. And the question was this, is using these methodologies and these steps, and I know the first one looked like a form, obviously, that was used. Yep. When you're introducing something like this, what do you do? Is it relative to how you would manage the paperwork, I guess is the question, right? If you've got these forms and you train everybody in how to use them and you introduce them, you know, is this the 5 why activity, is that something you've got a champion in each department on? Do they collect these and pull together meetings or discussions as necessary? Can you walk us through an example of that?
Sure. I'm going to go back to the South Korean that says leaders demonstrate. So what I did was when I had daily meetings, I would demonstrate these behaviors at the meeting. So what we did for this 5 why, we put up a big whiteboard. And when we had an issue that came up or a defect, on the whiteboard, we would talk through these things. We'd say, okay, what category is this? It's quality defect. Okay, good stuff. What's the problem? We'd write it down. And we would go through this in 15 minutes. But the only reason we could go through it in 15 minutes was because to do this was really, less than 5 minutes. But to do this, we'd often not get past here because we would look at this and say, was standardized work followed? And the eyes wide open, I don't know. Okay, guess what? If you don't know, then it probably wasn't. So focus on that first. So often we wouldn't need to get past this. So if you demonstrate it at daily meetings or weekly meetings, that I find is the best way to do it, to get it started. Because then you get people on board. They say, wow, that was simple. And it made me feel a little bit silly, but it was good. So that's one of the methods that we do. I try not to, you try and embed this responsibility into the leaders. You can have subject matter experts help support, but they shouldn't be doing. They should be supporting the transfer of knowledge. Does that help?
Yeah, so it sounds like it's kind of a leadership behavior that you try and instill. Okay.
It is. So the next part of the form is, well, there's really good solutions, and then there's not so good solutions. And what this is trying to do is educate the people on, often we'd say with health and safety and quality, we're going to retrain the employee. So we blame it on the employee, we retrain the employee. That's the worst solution, like honestly. I mean, the best solution is a Pokio, get rid of it. And yes, there is going to be some training requirements, but try and push people to thinking more about getting rid of the risk, which is to the left, as compared to relying on employee training. And this is what I see in South Korea and Japan and China. They do follow standardized work better, but because they follow that standardized work, it's often not the employee's fault. The fault is because the standardized work was maybe wrong, or they have too many risks associated with the standardized work. So that's operational excellence systems as far as some good practices. So it connects, it measures, and it drives the capability throughout the organization by demonstrating. Now let's look at innovation. Innovation is like a little baby. If you don't protect the little baby, then it's going to get squashed. So NPD stands for New Product Development Process. And innovation can happen inside that process, the normal process, or outside. Here's an example of how it could work outside. You create an innovation pipeline outside the investment process. The normal investment process might take 50 to 100 weeks, and it is for the big boys. It's for big money and big projects. These are the babies. But with these babies, you want them to be really, really small in scale. So small in scale that you can get them done really quickly. So if you want to try out new technology, say drones, don't come to me and say you want 3 or 4 drones in the air in different locations. Tell me you want 1 drone in 1 very small location. Prove the concept out and fail fast. So this is what I mean by protect it, incubate, scale down, and fail fast. And this is an example of a pipeline in the past. You want ideas at the front end, then you want them to move through, and some of them are going to fail, like robopilots. Drones, when I was at Canada Post, they survived. It was a funny story. The outgoing CEO told me that he'd never see the light of day for drones for Canada Post. And I thought, that sounds like a challenge. Sure enough, the other executive, they weren't so keen on the drones. But I knew that at some point, drones will be here. So I kind of protected the little baby and kept it low key and low cost. Until we had a pilot flying a drone from Salt Springs Island to the mainland BC, and the pilot was in Toronto. So a drone being driven by a pilot in Toronto out in BC. And then the commercial sector said, we'd like to try and send medication to remote areas. And that's how Canada Post became the first people in Canada to deliver a commercial product by drones. So you got to protect it a little bit, scale it down, and fail fast. Inside the engineering process, and then you want a flow. This is kind of showing you want a flow of things through this pipeline. If you're inside the new product development process, the traditional, I'll say, engineering process is you have one option, you move it through decision points, you make adjustments. It's traditional. There's some risk to it. It's not as, I'll say, forward thinking as some of the newer thinking, which is set-based concurrent new product development, where you start off with multiple options, you combine those options and keep innovative type thinking alive. And usually that helps to keep the designs more flexible and there's less issues. You can't deploy set-based concurrent new product development if you don't free up time through operational excellence systems, free up time and resources for people to participate more at the front end of this engineering process. So this is tougher, but it is something that more and more companies are adjusting to. Now,
Jay, sorry, Jay, do you have an example of a company that has deployed that, made that shift, I guess, from a process standpoint that you can think of? That
I know that, so the big three have done this, Volvo's done this. This is trickier with smaller organizations, small to medium size. I have not seen those types of organizations do it yet, which is why I would maybe more suggest this type of an approach. Take a look at new technology, but when you look at it and you're looking to decide on whether or not you want to take a risk of it, test it in a much smaller environment, scale it down, so it costs very little to get a proof of concept. This is done well, probably, or better suited for more medium to large type organizations, where they've got enough resources in operations that they can find waste and find fat. And instead of laying off those employees, they then reallocate them to the front end of this engineering process because they bring tremendous knowledge. But that's more a success with medium to large, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, digitization. I've got a few minutes left. So let's, digitization, where to start? Well, the first thing to do is, how are you going to measure? I hear, oh, we're going through digital transformation. Well, when's it going to end? So we have to pick the measurement on what you're trying to achieve. And then I'll share with you how one company did it, and they started at the top. A CIO went to a CEO of a $10 billion organization, said, how would you like on a weekly basis to see a dashboard for operations of the previous week's performance? And it would look like this, or something like this. He said, I'd love it. I'm tired of seeing like 5 different charts. Operations shows me five charts on how well they did. Sales shows me another 6 or 7 different charts on how well they're doing. And engineering shows me 3 more that they're doing. They're all different. He said, I'd love it if each one of the ops executives had the same type of dashboard. So that's what we did. I got responsibility for the operations. And so we agreed upon what was important as far as data. This is what's important. Everything else, if it doesn't tie to this data, you got to ask yourself, is it important? So with that in mind, we then connected to our IT systems. And then we went to the floor saying, okay, where are we going to put sensors and where are we going to automate? Well, if it doesn't connect up to the dashboard as directly as it should, then it's not going to be a priority. So by determining the dashboard, the data that's important, that helped us prioritize where we should automate, because automation allows not just for it to be more efficient sometimes, but it also allows for information and data to move. It's easier. So this is the approach that we took. And then we said, okay, well, how are we going to measure? Well, we looked at this data here and we tracked it all the way down to the floor and said, what % of the data on this dashboard is automated or digitized, coming up through the flow in a digitized way? We started off around 20%. When I left, we were at just over 75%. So that was our measurement to determine how far we had progressed with digitizing our information. We also measured how many hits the dashboard got, whether it be at a plant level, a supervisor level, or the CEO level, because we wanted the ad hoc reports to stop. We wanted it not just to be valuable for the CEO, but we wanted everyone in the organization looking at the same scoreboard and to understand that their scoreboard they're looking at, it aligns with the CEO's. So that's how we measure the transformation for digitization. What % of data was being digitized from the floor up to the dashboards, whether it be at a regional or CEO level, and was this dashboard getting used at daily floor meetings, CEO meetings, regional meetings? The more it's getting used, the more valuable it was. Okay, timing-wise, I'm gonna take 2 minutes, takeaways. We can learn from other countries and companies. We're leaders in some areas and we're followers in others. Successful companies or countries, they're focused on digitization, innovation, and operational excellence. And what they're also doing is they're proliferating it. They're not keeping it in, they're sharing it throughout the supply chain. So our next steps. The dashboard I showed you today, or the country rankings, we're gonna work on that. That's a first draft. And there's lots of different data out there to help us determine where we're positioned. So we're gonna work on that. We're then gonna identify our opportunities. We think innovation, digitization, and operational excellence systems are the areas that we think can do the most, but we're gonna validate that. And then we're gonna mobilize. And what I mean by mobilize, we're gonna start, and we had some discussions this week, Stuart and I, we're gonna mobilize probably, I'll say mini clusters or working teams around those areas. And let's understand where we have pockets of excellence in Canada that do this exceptionally well, and where can we proliferate it? And we're going to focus on small to medium size because we realize that 94% of the manufacturing companies in Canada are small to medium size. The challenge that those companies have is they have a hard time going from small to medium to large. And this is where we want to help them. We want them to scale up in these types of ideas, but they need to do it in a cost-efficient way because they're still growing. All right. So that's all I've got for today. I hope it offers you some ideas on how to maybe move forward. I'm not an expert. It's a perspective. And my perspective will change based on the input that or the feedback I get today, as well as feedback as I get that moving forward.
Well, Jay, we do have some questions here. I've had a couple more sent in to me, plus we have one. So I'll start with Leonardo has posted, actually it's a question. So Leonardo's question is, hi, what type of education is needed to better support innovation in Canadian manufacturing?
We need education more in operational excellence systems. I mean, that's one area. That's probably the biggest deficiency. I'm on a program advisory council at Conestoga College. I'm on University of Western Ontario. There are operations programs, and the engineering organization or the operations have them, but they're not getting into the detail as far as operational excellence systems as much as you would see Japan or South Korea or Brazil. They just have a much stronger institution around manufacturing.
Okay. All right. And then Larry has a question. Where does Poland sit as a target manufacturing country?
Poland's my favorite. I'm biased, okay? So I'm biased, but Poland, in Europe, if I'm going to Europe, Poland would be my top three. One is the labor flexibility. Number two is they're educated. They're fairly well educated. They're hungry. I don't know what else to say, but Poland, they evolve, they pivot fairly quickly. So they, yeah, they're they're a favorite.
Okay. And Jeff has a question. When you look at countries to target, will you also look at market by market? For example, the EU is making a large investment in hydrogen.
Yeah, so it's a good point. Canada's potential opportunity is related to electrical vehicles. So for example, Europe is making a large play in a certain sector. If we could maybe make a play in electrical vehicles, because nickel is the primary resource for batteries, which then supply to the OEMs. So could we be the global leader in electrical vehicles, whether it be cars, trucks, bikes, whatever? Could we be that? So yes, we are thinking about that as an opportunity for the Canadian manufacturing supply chain. Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to do now, Jay, so we've got a couple of minutes left. If you want to move to that last slide. First off, I want to thank you, Jay, for your time today. And I can speak from personal experience. There was a lot of effort and work put behind this study. There's more to come, obviously. And I would suggest that if anybody here is interested in being part of those working groups that you'll be forming, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out to myself. I'll connect you with Jay. If you have Jay's contact information, you can do that as well. But happy to make that connection if it makes sense. So what we have coming up, so I mentioned our roundtable discussion on this will be on Thursday, January 14th at 10 a.m. I will be sending out an email with a recording from today. It will also include some information on that. And please feel free to join us where we can continue this conversation. On Thursday, January 28th will be our next What's Next Thought Leadership event. Actually, it'll be our first one of 2021. And the topic is creating value for business through artificial intelligence, and specifically focused on manufacturing. We'll be joined by Chloe from Creabox to discuss strategies and case studies on how AI is transforming Canadian manufacturing. So I hope you'll join us then. Until then, I want to wish every one of you a very safe and happy holiday. Obviously, I hope you stay healthy, stay well, enjoy some time with your family. I want to thank you again, Jay, for joining us here today. And from NGen, again, from all of us to you, thanks again for joining us. Thanks for participating in 2020. We've got lots of stuff lined up for 2021, and we look forward to seeing you then. So have a great holiday, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Thank you.